You're welcome to the Diaspora Show for this week's segment on Civic Space TV, and with me in the studios is a panel of Ugandans in diaspora who are commentators on governance issues. Mr. Francis Kamhanda, you're welcome to the show. Dr. Okot. Yeah, Dr. Okot Ocheng, you're welcome to this episode of Diaspora Show. And Madam Miriam Chomgasho, you are welcome.
Thank you.
We have seen in the recent days a range of sanctions, being designated for Uganda's top public officials. I know we discussed a bit of this episode on Diaspora Show, but there are new developments. And the new developments include property of the Speaker in the United Kingdom with a bank account in a top bank in the United Kingdom, but also fresh visa sanctions by the United States involving the Right Honorable Speaker of Parliament, Honorable Anite Among, Honorable Goreti Chitutu, and Agnes Nandutu, the former ministers in charge of Karamoja docket, Honorable Amos Lugorobi, the Minister of State for Finance, and Brigadier Herrero, the man who commanded the Kasese killings in 2016. The five have not been sanctioned alone. They have been sanctioned together with their spouses. And I would like to start with you, Dr. Ocheng. What do you make of this? And what are the implications for these growing sanctions?
So, to begin with, I would like to thank all the fellow panelists and who always attend for us to have these healthy discussions about our country and thinking of how. Having said that, then I come to the sanctions.
Hey,
yes, no, our leaders back home, they keep growing into unattachables. That to the extent that for us who live in our countries, they have overgrown us. We are more or less like their properties and they can do whatever they need. But when we see other neighbors, since the world has become a global village, to see that what is being done is wrong, and then they come up and say, no, this is not right, and they put sanctions. For me as an individual, I welcome them. But my fear, though, is that will it stop these leaders in Uganda living a luxurious life to continue milking? When these sanctions were first put on the speaker by UK, you see how nearly the president of the country came in to defend the speaker without even giving it a second thought, and without saying, okay, I have been having my intelligence, or I have been having leaders that don't measure up to the standard. I know now they have been doing this, doing embezzlement, corrupting, and so on. That he would also come, even say, this is the time to carry out an internal investigation, and which, by the way, the IGG had already recommended that there should be a lifestyle audit, but which Museveni himself did not agree with. And now other countries can see that. But like as I have said, and last time, Dr. Bilete, I said that it is good to sanction them. Now you see like they are putting their spouses. And for me, I have said that it should go up to their families and close relatives, so that they should know what it means by being corrupt. And a corrupt person, a person who embezzles public funds, is as as good as somebody who is committing treason in a country. Because that single act, if it is money intended for a hospital, it can lead to almost so many people dying. If it is money that was intended for, like the COVID vaccine, you remember the scandal where the people were injected water, and so on and so forth. So I believe in these sanctions, but I still think they should be much more strict. But then again, like for me, when the UK gets properties of these people and then they are also attaching them, it would be better that these properties are sold, and then when a government that is pro-people, a government that thinks about people comes into power, then these resources come back. But also for them, when they seize such a properties, that money is never brought back to the country where it originated from. That's what I can say for now, and I'm again very happy to be on this panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francis. Miriam, if you may come in. It's raining sanctions on the speaker and a few other leaders. And the embassies in Kampala, both the US embassy and the Britain or United Kingdom embassy, have had conversations with our Minister of Foreign Affairs, and they warned him that more sanctions are coming and that the government should not try to do anything to circumvent the impact of sanctions. What's your take?
I'm so happy. Greetings to the panelists, first of all, and moderator. We are so happy. You know, for us in diaspora, we've been advocating for these functions for the longest time, and finally someone is acting. I'm so pleased, especially when Erweru is also included in the list of the sanctions. Because previously it was about corruption with the speaker and a few ministers. But now that they are tackling the human rights thing, which has been a sore eye to most Ugandans, you know how the military has been abusive of its powers, especially when it comes to how they treat the opposition leaders or anybody they think that disagrees with the government. But Erweru is known to have commanded the UPDF when they caused a massacre in Kasese. That was pure impunity, and the government never did anything to punish whoever was responsible or even inquire about how many people and lives were destroyed and how to rebuild those people's lives. Instead, they went ahead and imprisoned the king and his subjects, and almost destroyed whatever that cultural institution of Kasese was, of the Rwenzururus. So we have all human rights defenders and well-wishers, and the donor community, especially the human rights agencies, have been advocating for justice for the Kasese people for the longest time possible. This massacre happened almost more than 5 years ago. Was it 2016 or 17? But nothing has been done. And to see that US is finally waking up to put the sanctions on Erweru for the same cause, maybe it's a right step forward, long overdue, but welcomed nevertheless. I hope they also come up and like they are promising to sanction other people and look into other human rights abusers. Erweru had a command. Someone commanded him to do whatever he did, and nobody's talking about the commander-in-chief or the person who was the UPDF commander at the moment who could have led that incursion into the attack in the Kasese, the Rwenzururu kingdom. Secondly, we have had election violence and gross human rights abuses led by UPDF and other security forces, and we still have people who are missing. We still have political prisoners who are never either we don't know if some are still alive, some are never produced in courts, some are tortured almost near death, and all those people instead are promoted and awarded for their crimes by the government. And the donor community has been, okay, they've been focused somehow, somewhere, but no justice has been done to the people affected. And if they are extending sanctions, I pray and hope that they extend to those people, the leaders, especially the commanders of such a aggressive abuse of human rights on Ugandans. Maybe we could see some restraining, some restraint on the part of the security forces, especially since elections are coming. We have general elections in 2026. And on corruption, yes, a right step again in the right direction, but I hope they really come for the real corrupt, because the speaker is corrupt, yes, and the line ministers who were sanctioned, but those are like, we all know how gross the corruption issue is in Uganda. So those are like the few corrupt, and their cases as recent. It's good. It's good in setting a precedent, but there are so many big cases of corruption, and the perpetrators are going scot-free. So if these foreign powers, our development partners, as we call them, really want to help us in controlling corruption in Uganda, I hope they really reach out with their strong arm and catch the real people. And Francis has hinted on repatriating the stolen funds. We know the biggest hemorrhage of African resources.
Miriam,
Yes.
before you go to that, let's first exhaust the sanctions alone. And I have two questions for you. The Ereru, you said the General Ereru was working on orders.
Yes.
In law, wrongful orders should be disobeyed. So obeying wrongful orders is no defense. Can we first make him accountable to that? And the second question is, we know corruption in Uganda is a pandemic. It's not just the speaker. But what do you make of the conduct of the speaker, who seems to have run down the second arm of government in a short period of time?
Like I said, I'm glad the speaker is being restrained. I mean, someone is at least putting hard order to hold her accountable. But I am calling more. I mean, we welcome the foreign powers putting sanctions on the leaders, but what about us? What are we doing to control our own leaders and hold them accountable? So I wish Ugandans, especially the civil society, and when I'm talking about the civil society, I'm not talking about the traditional NGOs. I'm just talking about the academia, the civic leaders, the religious leaders, the people, private people, businessmen who pay taxes and are currently complaining about high taxation. The ordinary Ugandans, can we wake up and hold our leaders accountable? Can we demand that they vacate the positions they are abusing? I'm glad that someone is really controlling the speaker, and I don't know if there is a way she can be impeached, but I think she doesn't deserve to be a speaker of Uganda. This is the first time in Ugandan history, post-independence history, that we have had a real indisciplined speaker that has, like you said, who has run down that institution in the shortest time possible. I think she was underqualified as far as leadership qualities are concerned, and it's a shame, because the legislature is the strongest voice of the people in the democratic triangle, and if the parliament is disabled, then all people's voices are disabled into the democratic governance of Uganda. As for Erwero obeying unjust orders, yes, Erwero should be held accountable, but like I said, he wasn't acting alone, so even the commanders were party. So if you are punishing the person who commanded, you are going to punish the commanding forces of that human rights abuse incursion into Kasese, then take all of them. Why should they really be punished alone? We know there were commanders above him. There was a UPDF commander who might have been immediate commander. There is also the commander-in-chief who, instead of demoting Erweno and putting him into disciplinary action after the massacre, promoted him instead. And that shows that he condoned his action and even rewarded him with a promotion. So if we are to talk about sanctions, the whole group should go. That's how effective the sanctions are going to be. Next time, at least someone will think before they command another massacre into any other community in Uganda.
Dr. Ochan.
Yes, please.
It's raining sanctions in Uganda.
Okay.
We have now had sanctions from 3 countries, the superpowers and then the United Arab Emirates. Government has responded that these countries should respect Uganda's sovereignty. Does this make sense?
Thank you so much. And first, my apologies. I must say that, as a concept, sanctions, okay in principle, as a concept. And I think I do concur with my colleagues that if possible, we should broaden, the net so that we get, all the corrupt, the other bigger reptiles, in that pool or in that water. But I think the speaker is becoming now maybe, the one that's being grabbed at the moment. But as a concept, it's okay because it's an objective kind of pursued, foreign policy that can bring in, checks and balances. So sanctions are important foreign policy tool that, they use to try and, deter foreign states that are, acting contrary or even individuals. So in this case, the speaker and a few who have been sanctioned, they are trying to be kind of marked. But as I've said, I think the speaker was a little bit erratic from the beginning. I found the speaker, was not very guarded and is not so tactical, but the sanction is welcome. My prayer is that the sanction should not just end on the speaker and a few Ugandans who have been identified, because I think there are more corrupt individuals out there. And when you talk about respect for Uganda's sovereignty, in theory, it's is a prudent idea. In theory, it's okay to ask every nation to respect, the internal affairs of every nation, but also they have a right to deny certain individuals from accessing their territories. So hence, I would think the Ugandan government should explore better ways to annex these contradictions. Otherwise, the speaker's situation is very embarrassing because she's the third in the country, the speaker. And if the speaker is tainted, then that also shows a lot that in general, the country is rotten to the core. So I think the speaker's position, being the third in theory in the country, that actually projects a very nasty picture on on Uganda as a country.
Yeah, thank you very much. So what's the significance of sanctions? And I know I have asked you before, but the response of government shared yesterday was that Uganda is a sovereign state.
Yes.
It won't accept interference by superpowers, and that they should leave the national processes to be completed, since the 3 ministers who have been sanctioned are facing court charges. Does this make sense?
As I indicated much earlier, in theory, sanctions major objectives are to pursue and to modify the behavior of an individual, an agent, a nation, to reduce the capacity for maneuver or weaken his position, in public to denounce those individuals. So I think it's a good, intention that the superpowers are trying to impose sanctions on these individuals. But as a country, I don't think we have a very effective functioning judiciary that can, unearth and bring out justice about corruption. I think as a country, we have a very, very serious chronic, corruption kind of status right now. Almost every level of the society is corrupt. And I would say that, in fact, if you are to go in government and to pick on any Tom and Jerry in government, very few would be left scot-free. So I don't trust the internal processes that the Ugandan government are trying to market to the rest of the superpowers. In both theory and practice, I think it's a noble concept and idea that the sanctions have been, excised on these three ministers. But our system in Uganda, the institutions are broken. I don't have no trust and faith in the judiciary. Hence, superpowers should hold their position.
Thank you very much. Coming to you, Francis, I'm back to you. The speaker is number 3 in the country. How will she preside over her office with the several, multiple sanctions on her head?
Thank you, Dr. Birete. Number one, like as we have said, the speaker is an embarrassment, not only to the NRM government, but to we as Ugandans. And it is also an abuse to all of us as Ugandans. And any sane government, the NRM would have already moved a motion of ensuring that he's censored. Because number one, the sanctions are intended, for example, for her, there is a series of them, financial sanctions to restrict him in accessing whatever assets she has outside the country that she stole, what she stole from Ugandans, and then she went and put outside the country, which means she can't even wire money and from either his account wherever it is in the UK or other countries, because now we know only that, but you may find everywhere. Generally, we have to dig deeper. So it will have a constraint on her financially in terms of international transactions. But what I was saying, that you had when she was saying that, I have not been chased from Bukedia, I can go to Bukedia. Now she's going to milk not only people in Bukedia, but other Ugandans. And therefore, that's where our government now should come in and say, okay, for them, what sanctions are they also putting on the Speaker of Parliament? Then number two, of course, it tints our image, because for us who are out, they also look at us that, these are the corrupt guys, because that person is representing us. If you want to know the constituents, you just look at the type of leaders they elect. So that's why I'm saying, much as I don't agree with what she's saying, but I do know she's the speaker of my country, and therefore wherever I go, people will be associating me with that kind of speaker. And therefore that's why I say we should condemn her. The government, her own party, should come and condemn her. And the first thing, she would have stepped aside, by the way. And then we carry out as investigations go on. Because this is the person who was involved in the Iron Sheet scandal. And government did nothing. They keep promising, we are investigating, we are doing this, we are doing this. I do agree that there is sovereignty, that each country is sovereign. But now the question is, she should see how her actions were also affecting the UK and other countries. Number one, she stole money from Uganda to go and invest in UK. I'm also angry with UK as a Ugandan, that how do you accept people to keep stealing from our homes and you come and welcome the money to come and invest in your countries. Indirectly, UK is impoverishing Uganda, and therefore I accept their move that they should even cast the net much more. Is Museveni having, is the other henchmen in the NRM having assets outside the country, and we begin digging deep. How did they get them? And all that, we clean them up. And it should be a joint effort where the UK, US, and then the United Arab Emirates have come up. Even these other countries like Turkey and so on, they should also come up. Because if we are to fight corruption in this modern era, it should be a global war that we all have, so that they are squeezed and they are not going to any other country to do those investments. Then travel restrictions, I welcome them. Oh, you can imagine, not only the speaker, but other government officials, luxurious trips, where the Speaker of Parliament is going to be spending $4,000 as per diem.
Okay, I hope you join us back soon. I think that she has network issues. But add on what Francis had said, you know, we know there are so many corrupt officials, and they steal money and hide it abroad. The good thing these days, like we saw in the incident of other countries like Nigeria, that the governments like UK were returning the stolen money by the former president and the family members back to the country. Same applies for Angola, Dos Santos and the daughter and other of his other leaders in his government who had swindled a lot of money from the country and taken it abroad. But we know we lose so many resources in such a manner. So if there are to be sanctions, can we investigate all our leaders? The president was writing to the IGG and asking the IGG whether these leaders, especially the speaker, declared the property she has in UK and other areas. And the declaration, I think we need to do the audit, the income audit, either by the IGG or anybody concerned before a person comes into leadership. Can we audit you and see how are you getting your wealth? Whether you are a billionaire, whether you don't have much money, how are you getting your wealth? And over time, and that should be done regularly. So we see how much you are accumulating and how you are accumulating it. And that in a way can control corruption, because not only do they steal and hide out of the country, but they also, they're stealing and they are hiding it in the country. It's a public rumor that the biggest real estate projects in Kampala are run by corrupt leaders, are headed by corrupt leaders under de facto names, under fake titles. You know, someone hides in another person's name, but is the one running the properties. And most of the time, since these leaders have access to power, they don't even pay taxes. They are doing businesses, they store money, they are doing business, they are not even paying taxes. And then we know the president had earlier said that as long as you are stealing and investing in Uganda, he has no problem for you. But this money is supposed to be serving all Ugandans, not an individual and his family or her family. This is supposed to be the money that is supposed to provide public services to the Ugandans. It's the money supposed to be building schools for all those Ugandans who are on kids who are on the streets. It's money supposed to be paying for hospital bills. It's there was recently research. I think it's a survey done somewhere. I saw it in some papers in Uganda that more than 40% of the people, more than 40% of Ugandans who are admitted in the hospital end up selling their land. And we all know in Uganda the biggest source of livelihood is land, because more than 60% of our population are peasants. They live on the land. So if you fall sick, one family person falls sick, you sell a piece of land. Suppose you get 3 members of the family sick in that year. That means you're going to be landless and you have nowhere to live and no source of household income for that family, just simply because they are fallen sick. So corruption goes a long way to disenfranchise and oppress Ugandans economically, and it should really, like Francis has hinted earlier, it's like murder. It's like a big crime that needs to be eliminated and fought very seriously. Corruption goes a long way to destroy our economy. Instead of planned development, planned support for everyone and provision for every Ugandan, all the taxpayers, we instead have a few individuals holding the national resources. And to make matters worse, you know, the more money because they are hiding it, they don't even invest it productively. So they hide it in real estate, in redundant real estate projects that are not even adding value to the economy. So it's a loss to everybody. And it's one of the reasons we are where we are. Uganda used to be the leading country. Uganda used to be the leading economy in East Africa 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It was the upcoming. I mean, Kenya was big and Tanzania was bigger, but Uganda was like the fastest growing economy in East Africa at that moment. But today we are the almost, okay, of course we have the underdogs, especially DRC and Sudan, who have been in civil war for most of that time, that are still trying to reorganize their economies. But the old East Africa, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Uganda now is the least, the slowest as far as economic growth is concerned. And one of the biggest reasons why we are not progressing as fast as we used to is because of corruption and bad leadership. So
thank you so much for the extensive submissions. I must say that, as I said before, corruption is a serious nightmare in Uganda. And when we talk of corruption in Uganda, they say that the fish begins to decompose from the head. So when we talk of corruption, then the top political leadership have to be first taken heads on and held accountable. If you realize pretty much, all the arms of government are corrupt. The judiciary, the executive, the parliament, and as now we are discussing, as you're aware, the parliament of Uganda has become the mega house for corruption. Almost all segments of our countries have been compromised and are corrupt. So corruption is now a fashion and a culture in Uganda. So we must have the political will. If we don't have the political will, we shall not be able to address and harness this cancer that is trying to, destroy the country. And as you said before, as you know, you find that the ordinary Ugandans don't have access to health care. And when they fall sick, they have to decompose of their property. For example, sell their land. And the land are oftenly purchased by the rich, or those who are economically and politically connected and well placed. And that exacerbates both corruption and inequalities in our societies. Before, if you are even to roll back, to kind of backtrack I can tell you, by the time of independence, Uganda was actually neck to neck with Singapore, South Korea, until the first coup in 1971 that kind of disrupted Uganda a little bit. Then later on, from that time until 1980, 86, it was kind of held back. Then in the late 90s, Uganda was doing pretty well economically. As we talk now, we have lost the focus and the fight on corruption. Hence, I do welcome the sanctions because sanctions has its own pros. Because when sanctions are being executed, this will place the leaders who are trying to be irresponsible more conscious so that they become more mindful about liquidating public funds and resources. So I would like to see the government of Uganda come out to support this cause of fighting corruption, not just lip service. They should not spare anyone, anybody, even the allies who are in government, who are corrupt. They should be held accountable. They should be persecuted. In this way, we would bring in, fairness, justice, and some level of civility in our society as Uganda. It's very important. And as you realize, even now, if you go to public sectors, the populations are not very keen, are not ethical in their work. People get paid for free. They do no work. And if they're there, corruption is embedded in every process in the country, even from hiring, from identifying, even in the health sector, the education sector, almost every sector has been compromised. So that is a cancer that must be medicated and addressed. And I would like also on this note, to compare Uganda with other neighboring countries. I would say Tanzania, to some degree, among the East African countries, in terms of trying to combat corruption, they are fair compared to other East African countries, because our neighbor Kenya too are not that very good in handling the corruption issues. Our neighbor in Sudan, Southern Sudan, are also worse than us. But I would say that we should actually not condemn the superpowers by trying to propel and sanction some of our leaders. Instead, we should encourage them to expand the hook and the net so that they can maybe, block many from stepping in that soil. Thank you.
One question, Dr. Chen.
Yes.
Francis earlier hinted that if our leaders are corrupt, it also gives us a bad name. I know you've, where you're living, maybe in Canada, you've tried to apply for some jobs and whatever. What's the impression when you say you're from Uganda?
The first thing, most times the employers or the business partners will ask you that, how is Uganda? Intentionally, and some still think it's Idi Amin, the president.
Yeah, that's true.
Some of the guys actually right now, they don't remember Idi Amin as the president. And they always say they hear that the police are very corrupt. They hear there's a lot of corruption. So they know that there is corruption. And actually, also, this creates kind of distrust and mistrust. So as a person or as an immigrant from Uganda, being in a foreign country, you have to prove yourself that you are credible, that you are reliable, that you are ethical, because before you come on board, their minds already been kind of biased poisoned, intoxicated by the fact that you're corrupt, unethical, because of the few things happening back home. These things are news in BBC, in Al Jazeera. They're news, so they know that, like example, the Ugandan parliament has been compromised and become kind of, more of a club of the corrupt who are there to go for joyrides at the expense of ordinary Ugandans. So it brings us a very heavy load on our backs as Ugandans in the diaspora. Very difficult. Even too, if you go like to try and even maybe like invite people from Uganda to come and study here or work here, you find that even the migration themselves are very hesitant, very kind of doubtful of all the details you put down. One, they think all what you are putting down are fabricated and lies. Two, they believe that you are not authentic. You're not authentic, you're not real, you're not dependable and reliable. Hence, when you come here, you will do the opposite. So we have a very bad kind of image because of our leadership styles and the few kind of frogs that will mess up the water back home. So I wish that maybe Ugandans could rise up one day and grab the bulls by their horns. You have been lamenting for a very long time as Ugandans. And this is a concern. I've always said that in any struggle, the youth and the students are the engine of any struggle. But right now, there's some gap. Our youth and students, their energies are somewhere else in the struggle. So all these are also, they kind of exacerbate the contradictions and challenges in fighting this corruption and bad governance we have.
Thank you, Ochen. I can also say that, the image of our country, in the past we used to say Nigerians are corrupt, and whenever you would see a Nigerian, you don't trust them. But now, Ugandans, we joined that league of the corrupt in Africa, and you are doubted everywhere you present. You present your academic papers, someone is going to cross-check and ask you further and further, try to inquire whether anything is genuine or not. And, we've inherited the stain of our leaders by default. And that's a disadvantage to all of us. I'm going to ask you, Ochen, to say something. This month is African Liberation Month, and what have you got to say as I try to see if we can reconnect Francis Perry?
This month is African Liberation Month, and I must say that, firstly, we begin by, paying tribute to our, past forefathers and mothers who actually laid the foundation for the struggles and, empowerment of the continent. And most of them are now gone, but the struggle continues. And secondly, I want to also take this opportunity to say that I can see, this month being the African Liberation Struggle Month, I can see also some good progress in South Africa. As we see that, as results were rolling in, I can see that after 3 solid decades of, of having majority rule in South Africa, for once, the ANC is going to have, a less kind of power. We have to kind of reach out to other, opposition parties to talk and form a coalition, which is good. I think that, being African Month for Liberation, I think that is a direction in the right, spot. So we must kind of congratulate our brothers and sisters in South Africa for having conducted an election in a peaceful way, and to some degree, it was transparent and peaceful. So it kind of complements the month. And secondly, I must say that Africa, we've been facing a lot of quagmires if it comes to governance and leadership. But I must say that we have had a few, good progress in some parts of the continent, like in West Africa, in Senegal. We also had a very, progressive election whereby young Turks came in and they are taking in the footsteps of our forefathers and mothers, which is good for the African Liberation Month. So that means the dreams and the ideals are not lost. So the ideals of the Kwame Nkrumahs, of the Nyereres of this world, are still sounding and standing, Though I would like to see that, the AU, the African Union, should just maybe stop being a barking dog with no teeth. I wish they could put themselves, together and become more practical, more solid, more, functional, so that they can have a say around the continent. I find that to a large degree, the African Union have not done much in West Africa. We have had a series of coup d'etats in West Africa, whereby also many elected government of Francophone backgrounds have been overthrown by the military. And the African Union, as usual, just releases condemnations and nothing happens. And up now, when you go to countries like Mali, Guinea, Bissau, Guinea, Conakry, all these were overrun by the military, and they're there. Even Burkina Faso, all these are being run by the military. So again, on us African continent, as we celebrate and remember this African Liberation Month, it's also important that we do some review on how we can rectify and maybe, make sure that, we try to correct where things are not going well. I must say that we cannot have copy and paste model of democracies from the Western kind of model, but still we need to make sure that the wishes, the interests, and aspirations of the Opoloi are honored and respected in Africa as a whole. So this is a path that we must also take. And also, as we talk of liberation, it should be both from the political, social, economic, and environmental liberations. I find that we need also to, as we celebrate this month for the African liberation, we must also pay attention to our environmental sector as a continent. We need to make sure that we protect and conserve our nature, our environment, because this is the next, even the current nightmare. You can see there are clear testimonies of climate change with severe consequences. There have been kind of alternations, changes in the rain patterns, and this kind of course undermines our backbone of our sectors like agriculture and even the general well-being. So as we celebrate this month, let us try to check and work on different sectors of our economies and political aspects. But otherwise, there's a lot of hope in the continent. Let's be hopeful, and let's try to push for more African solidarity, African unity, African togetherness as we celebrate this month. And also let's wish other countries that are having elections in the near future to have a peaceful elections. So thank you very much, Miriam.
Yeah, thank you very much, Okot, for that lengthy submission and also well-informing. And Francis, coming to you, the Africa Liberation Month has not, seen any, there is no celebration in Africa. There are little gains. Mm-hmm. Just as we discussed this, South Africa is conducting an election where the ruling party, the African National Congress, has lost its majority in parliament. It's likely to score 42 or 43%.
Yes.
What do you make of the democratic journey that Africa has made since independence? And where is the missing link? Yeah, Okot, maybe you could answer that as Francis comes on.
Yes, thank you very much. As I was saying much earlier, that I'm very humbled and thrilled at the same time by the manner that our African compatriots in South Africa have conducted themselves during these elections. To some degree, has been kind of peaceful, and I'm happy that also that the dominance of the ANC for the last 3 decades that has been having the majority in parliament has been checked. I think they've had now 40% and something, from the final results. And I think then the DA party comes second with 21% something. Then the new part of MK for Zuma comes third with maybe like, I think either 11 something. Then EEC of Malema comes with 9 point something like that. So it's a very, tight race. And I want to see how ANC will reach out and try to form alliance, which is good. Will bring in checks, balances, and efficiency. Because if they want to be in a coalition, then to some degree, they have to also kind of make consensus and compromises so that they can work as a team with that, other party. I wonder which party, maybe the Economic Freedom Fighters, I'm not sure. I don't know whether it would be the DA, yeah. But from what I saw, the DA was saying they want to form alliance. They want to kind of check on the radical EF do not go in government. So to me, that is very good kind of democracy. So as we are celebrating the African Liberation Month, that is something, is a good kind of direction that's taking place, growth. We also look back in Senegal, just maybe 2 months ago, we had a very good also kind of show whereby, a young group of thugs came and dislodged the sitting government, which was very good. I would also say Kenya also next door. They have their own kind of challenges, but to some degree, they always also try to, navigate their muggy political waters with some consensus at the end. Right now, I see that Raila Odinga and Ruto are talking, which is good. I wish also other countries like Uganda, we could encourage to see General Museveni and Bobby Wine would talk, and Kizza Besigye would be very good for Uganda. So because I think political competition is not being like enemies, it's just that we all try to, advance and market different, ideas and projections. So I would want to see that in Uganda. So in general, as you are saying, there is no celebration in Africa. I was actually saying much earlier that I wish the AU, the African Union, could be a backing, dog that has a teeth to bite. I find that as a body, the AU, to some degree, has been just a club for heavy-handed leaders who go there to dine and wine, annually or from time to time without actually doing much work. There are things that AU would do. Like, for example, I was saying much earlier, you find that in West Africa, especially in the Francophone kind of, countries, the military has, kind of overthrown elected governments, and the AU just, releases condemnations and no follow-ups. So these are areas that have kind of let us down. I wish, we could empower the AU so that they could be at the forefront of the African liberation and empowerment of the continent. And this empowerment should actually be, envisioned from all the sectors, from both the political, social, economic, and environmental. The environmental aspects are very important. We need to conserve and protect, our natural resources and environment. Because if we don't, as a continent, we are going to actually suffer more. We already have kind of examples. We already have clear indicators, of climate change. So we need, as we celebrate this month, let us also have some self-reflection as a continent from where we've been and where we are going, So we need to be very careful when we go at international level. As Africa, do we go as beggars? Do we go as equal partners? Do we go as equal partners to the UN or to other bodies, or we go as, underdogs? So as we celebrate this month, these are areas we need to review and then see how to move forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Okoto Chen. Francis, are you with us?
Yes.
Yeah, Francis, what's your take on Africa's Liberation Month, and what progress have we made since independence?
Thank you, Dr. Birete and the rest of the panelists. That is a heavy-loaded question, but I would first begin from Africans deliberating ourselves from what? Now, if we begin from our monarchies and traditional kingdoms, the way how they were ruling us, and we are more or less that is not right. And then colonials come in, and we say this is not right. And then we gain independence. And we have neocolonialism that we are trying to fight. And now here comes our leaders, again politically. They go back into making themselves as kingpins, making themselves as kings and so on. And then they take us back even to a worse situation than what colonialists were doing. So to me, I again say, okay, is it worth it to celebrate the Liberation Month with all these challenges in terms of politics, in terms of leadership, and so on? You remember kings in the past would either have people, if they are dying, then they would be buried with somebody alive, or with possessions, or with whatever. That was killing with impunity. Currently, the leaders we have, they are doing the same. So what liberation are we talking about here? Now, if we come to the economic perspective, all globally, countries are industrializing. They are getting civilized. For us, we are still dependent, even on simple things, like a toothpick, a safety pin. We still depend on either foreign country that we have to import it. So that's how I look at liberation. And I said this liberation, for me, I look at it from a micro level. If I go back home, does my parent, do my people look to be liberated? The answer is no. They are not. And then is, where did we go wrong? And to me, all this comes and zeroes on bad leadership that we have been talking about. Not until we address the question of bad leadership, then we cannot get the liberation that we need as Africans, as a people, and also may be globally, to also assume our position in the global arena. Yes, Dr. Chen was talking about some examples of pockets here and there in Africa. But the problem is power corrupts. At some point, then you find them going back to the same pot. So I want us generally, this topic, I think, Dr. Virete, could be a topic where we need to give it a full panel and we discuss it on its own. Because if we look at that, again, liberation as Africans, in terms of social aspects, look at our education. Have we seen also, like, as how people flock to go and study from the West, they also flock to go and study from Africa? If we are talking in terms of liberation, it is only until all these different aspects or components that make what a country should be or a people should be, that other people admire, then I'll begin thinking that we are liberated. Like Dr. Chen talked about something that was really good about, like, France still influencing countries in the Francophone, that even they have to keep their money in France. Their telecommunication system, the same. So to me, all this it shows that we are still, if it was on a scale of 1 to 10, we are still at 2. And that's why now I say that our ancestors, the Patrice Lumumba, the Kwame Nkrumah, and all those, the Nyereres and so on, the vision they had for Africa, I think wherever they are in their graves, they are crying for, to say, what is this that is going on? In this century, we would have moved more than that. Like, for example, leadership or democracy or the abuse of human rights would not be surfacing in Africa. We would have already graduated from that. Now we would be pacing the rest of the world in terms of industrialization, in terms of globalization, to assume our seat. But we are nowhere. We are still smartly dressed, going nowhere. That's why I was telling you that in an event where, again, I'm sorry to take us back, in an event where we are struggling to industrialize in Uganda, but the Speaker of Parliament is getting 4,000 as per diem and traveling to do luxurious things, while the Minister of Finance is lamenting our debt burden is now over 100 trillion. Does that make sense? Do you say that these people are liberated? As we struggle to liberate ourselves from the colonialists, now there is a struggle. We are struggling to liberate ourselves from the bad leadership. But now, as Ocheng said, corruption is deep even in families. Now we are going to be struggling to liberate ourselves from ourselves. Because I think the mind is not all that right to say that we are in the right direction, and not until we tackle that, then I still believe that we would be smartly dressed going nowhere, because we are almost moving, or we are on a merry-go-round. We are rotating in the same position, and we seem to be knowing what the problem is, but we seem to be hesitant not to take a bold step in as far as solving the problem is concerned. But again, as I would say, do we have the indicators that show that we can be liberated? The answer is yes. Africa, we have. Why is it that when the Ochengs are in Canada, they are, wherever they are, Chom is in the US and so on, they are not corrupt? For example, they are focused, they are time conscious, they are following the system, they don't talk about African time. Why come when they come back to Uganda, then all these setting all back to Africa? So these are some of the things that we need to address before we liberate Uganda. Also, we have, even me and Ocheng and the rest of the other people, we have to liberate ourselves from our own self. Otherwise, we risk being people who will be taken serious, and to pass on our continent, to pass on our country, Uganda, to the next generation where it is in peace and not pieces. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Francis, for that submission. And I want to now come to you, Miriam. The likes of Kwame Nkrumah and Nyerere used to say that without economic independence, political independence alone is nothing. Whereas we experienced slave trade under colonialism, Africa is now consumed by voluntary enslavement as our young and productive youth drown in the Mediterranean and Atlantic Ocean, trying to seek for greener pastures in the diaspora where you people operate from. What is missing, given that Africa is the most naturally endowed continent by God? What's the problem?
We are part of the voluntary exercise. So, yeah, that concerns us. And why are we leaving our motherland? Because things are not working, and that's hey, yeah. It's us you are talking about.
You are part of the enslavement.
Yeah, like we didn't drown in Mediterranean, but we are also the voluntary exiles, and we are enslaved. Francis is there saying that we follow the Zungu culture, but we don't have a choice. Survive if you can survive. But I think we can use that to our advantage. You know, our fathers, when our forefathers, the political forefathers of Africa, they mobilized in diaspora. The people who had gone in diaspora, the students, the Nkrumahs, the associations of African students, the Pan-African, the global Pan-African movement of Gave, those associations were instrumental in ushering and fighting for independence in Africa back home. So we are here. We can learn skills which we can transfer and use to transform Africa. We can get resources. You talked about economic empowerment. And remittances these days are the biggest, some of the biggest foreign exchange earning for most African countries. But the problem is when youth are really forced into what you call voluntary slavery, like what we see youth really on a do or die mission to cross the Mediterranean Sea. Some of the youth, especially in Uganda, our young people are thronging at the airport every other day, trying to do manual labor, going to do manual labor in the Middle East. And today we have more than, I think we have almost like 2 million Ugandans in diaspora, living in diaspora. And the big chunk of these today are young people who are exported as labor, manual laborers into the Middle East. Those are like, that's like a new development. It's coming on so recently, and there are reasons why this is coming. The high unemployment rate back in Uganda. Okay, it's not only Uganda, it's all African countries. The young people, we have the youngest population in the world, but these young people who are even skilled, they are educated, but they don't have jobs back home. The economies of Africa have not grown at that level where they can accommodate their people. So our human resource is hemorrhaging and instead is going out to develop other people's economy instead of being harnessed to develop our own economies. If we can follow the example of the Asian tigers, the Asian tigers, yes, send their people outside to study and get skills which they couldn't get back home. But they had a mechanism of skills transfer, and they would bring their educated back home and use them to develop their economies. That's why we see them propelling as high as they can be, and they are now the fastest growing economies in the world. Even when Africa has more resources than theirs, we have more natural resources which could be pushing our development much faster than the Asian tigers, but they are advanced as far as education is concerned. The environment, the economic environment, there is almost zero tolerance to corruption. The leaders are committed to developing their economies. And most importantly, they preserve their cultures. They are so, if we can call it in African times, it could be so, they are so pro-Asia. They are so pro their culture. So in Africa, we lack that. I don't want to call it Pan-Africanism because that word has been diluted over time. But we lack that feeling for our motherland, that patriotism, that desire to make us get better. And those people who are really have the passion to develop our continent are not in charge. The leaders we have, like an example of among Anite, our speaker, who only care about dressing up and going abroad to have cosmetic touch-ups and retreats, and nothing much back as far as development is concerned. So we have the greedy stuff that are stealing from us, are stealing from the motherland instead of developing the motherland. But I want to go back a little bit and talk about African liberation month in general. Here in diaspora, there are few organizations who celebrated the day, like African Rising. But I would like to see the African Liberation Month celebrated all over Africa, as we celebrate here in USA, as we celebrate the Black Month in February. Let everybody, especially kids at school, let them be taught what Pan-Africanism is. What does it mean to be an African, and what is at stake? How can we be liberated as Africans? And when we talk about Africans, especially for us in diaspora, we don't limit our talk to the continent Africans. Like the AU passed earlier on in 2000, I think 5 or 6, when they said the African diaspora is the 6th region of Africa. We have our brothers and sisters scattered all over the world thanks to slave trade. And so we have African countries who are equally in ruins, like Haiti. Haiti is 90% African country, but it's devastated by nature, first of all, but the politics. It's still facing the post-colonial challenges we face in Africa. There are so many Africans in Brazil. There are so many Africans in America, Europe, everywhere. We have the Aboriginals, the original Black people in Australia, and everywhere. So when we are talking about the liberating the African, it shouldn't be limited to the continent. It should be about liberating the African peoples everywhere, wherever they are. And the theme for this year has been education fit for the 21st century, building resilient education systems for increased access to inclusive, lifelong quality and relevant learning in Africa. I wonder how many countries are really following that, not Uganda, if I can recall. Yes, please. Yes.
There are reasons for Africans to celebrate. We understand you people in diaspora have this strong attachment of Pan-Africanism when you're far away, because it makes more sense to you people to connect. But look at the Africans in Africa. Look at the Africans in Uganda. Look at the Africans in South Africa. I was in Johannesburg last year, and all the Uber drivers I used told me they will vote DA. The DA, the Democratic Alliance, led by the whites, the former apartheid party, has no support from the blacks today, because the blacks in South Africa think that the white man was better than the oppressors in a black skin. So what is the reason to celebrate?
We don't have to celebrate. It's commemoration, and that's the reason we should have that discussion, so that we put our minds together and we really. So the commemoration would be, let's have a discussion about Africa in that month of the liberation. Are we liberated? What is missing, and how can we fix it? So it's not celebration per se; it's commemoration, and it's apt, like you said. It's here now that we are talking, that we are focusing on Africa and we are talking about South Africa. Yes, can we have that discussion across Africa? And we see, what about West African countries which recently faced a coup? And I saw the military junta saying that they are extending their leadership to another extra 5 years instead of handing over to a civilized, democratically picked government. Yet the AU had outruled coups and has sworn that there shouldn't be any more coups in Africa. But look at what is going on. So that's the discussion we should be having. Why are Africans going into voluntary exile all over Africa, from West Africa to the east to the south? Or African youth are running away from their country because of they are desolate. They are trying to survive, and they can't do it back home because of the bad leadership. The economies have been run down by corrupt leaders. So let's have that discussion, and extending the diaspora people. I think most Africans in diaspora have the means to use into economic liberation. They have exposure, they have the skills, and we can even create alliances which we can use back home. Today, a few years ago, we've been mobilizing for sanctions against our leaders who are corrupt. How about we mobilize for development? How about we create funds which we can be using to develop our mother countries, instead of borrowing from donors which come with a lot of conditionalities and expensive interests? So there are things we can really put our minds together, and given the technology that we have today, and put our minds together as Africans and have a discussion. And this is the right month. You might not call it a celebration, but can we talk Africa this month everywhere? That's when we could see what is missing and how we can fix it.
Well, fair enough. I'm coming back to you, Dr. Okot. The African citizen, if you passed a referendum today in Africa to vote against African leaders and our colonial masters, there is a likelihood here in Uganda and anywhere else that some of these countries would vote for the return of colonial masters for two reasons: service delivery, but also fairness and equity and inclusion. Save for South Africa and Zimbabwe that had the challenges with the white occupation and minority rule. So what do you think has driven us to this extreme?
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Sarah. In fact, even our own motherland, Uganda, have had, yes, even our own motherland, Uganda, have had many fellow compatriots saying that Uganda was better off during the British time. At least they left visible and solid infrastructure, like schools, hospitals, and things were functioning. And they claim that after independence and so on up to now, things have been destroyed. So I'm not surprised that if there are to be any referendum, we could easily lose to our former, masters. So I'm not surprised. And I think, as you ask, what drove us to all this level at this moment? I think the writings are clear on the wall. As a continent, and even Uganda, as a nation, we've had a lot of contradictions, historical contradictions. based on superficial kind of tendencies. Sometimes we become very emotive, and you find because of bad leadership, the leaders take advantage to exploit these kind of sensitive, differences. Like Africa is a very multicultural continent, just like any country, whether from the ethno, regional, religious, cultural, they're very diverse. So if you're in a diverse, human environment, and you don't, handle in a more honest way, you are bound to create what problems. And this is what has transpired in most African states. For example, in Uganda, after independence, you find that the British, whether consciously or unconsciously, left Uganda just on a volcano, by the fact that they're saying that the Bunyoro and the Buganda, issue to be resolved by the new government. When the parliament voted on that, the rest is history. You know what happened. These were kind of setups. So these were sensitive, issues that were caused by identity, diversities. So you find right now in Africa, across Africa, you find issues of inclusivity and diversity, equity, and respect for human rights are wanting. And this kind of has undermined most national integrations and even African integration. That's why you find that in 1960-61, when Kwame Nkrumah was pushing for one Africa, the other leaders like Nyerere and Obotes were saying, no, let's go slow. Let's maybe try and go first regional. They don't have the same kind of vision because why? Because the continent is very multi-cultural and diverse. So when you find leaders who don't kind of practice, inclusivity and diversity and respect for, human rights, then that becomes a problem. So I think we have a problem even too, like in Uganda or Africa. The learning, even the education system of learning is a problem. You find that we learn more about European history. We learn more about American history, as opposed to being paying more attention to African kind of studies. You find here in Canada, high school, even colleges, sometimes there are no African studies. In fact, at the high school level or even elementary school, we, the parents, are pushing that will also teach something about African continent or culture or identity, so that the African kids who were born here can also know about their heritage and their identities. But they're facing so much opposition. Look back in Africa too, sports. Right now, Ugandans or Africans don't care about their local clubs. They are very thrilled to watch Liverpool, Arsenal. When those teams are playing, all the cities are shut down. When KCC is playing, Villa is playing, no one cares. But when Arsenal is playing, Liverpool is playing, the clubs, the pubs, the restaurants are full. These are clear, intoxication of the minds. Our minds have been colonized. Sometimes even you find that you have people who want to push and even force the accents intentionally to be like the white man. Yes, to fit in. People go bleaching. Yeah, they want to be white. Look at our speaker. They want to bleach. They don't appreciate who they are. You're not proud of who you are. These are clear, mental issues and colonization. So before even we go further, have to deconstruct. We're going to deconstruct our mental standing on who we are based on our identities. So we have got a long way to go. I think, there are a few examples in Africa who might be trying. Botswana, despite their also sometimes hiccups here and there, they're trying, to nurture and promote, democratic principles and governance in their small nation. They're trying. Even a country like South Africa, despite its all, the wrong things, they're trying. I think even a country like Malawi, they're catching up a little bit. They're behind, they're catching up. So there's hope. But to a large extent, I think, we have misused our diversity, our multicultural kind of, existence. Sometimes I tell people our diversities or our differences, these are beauties, we could celebrate our differences, It's not bad to be who you are. You can embrace who you are in a more progressive way as opposed to causing problems. You can find our leaders sometimes even feel very uncomfortable putting their escorts who come from far away. They want to put their own cousins, their own nephews and nieces to be their cooks, their escorts. Why? They are not safe. They are kind of allergic to those who are different. So the difference we are trying here, like in Canada, they try very much to promote a DEI. That is the diversity, inclusion, equity, human rights. These are the key areas that actually what are being fostered and emphasized and amplified on a daily basis. I wish our continent could embrace these mindsets, but in a more Afrocentric model, not copy and paste. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Okot. Kamhanda, I'm coming back to you. There has been a consistent democracy decline in Africa, and there is a school of thought that maybe this imported democracy is not suitable for Africa, that we need to rethink our own democracy. What do you make of this school of thought? Do you think rethinking democracy would help make our situation better? And if we were to rethink democracy, then what model would it be like? Miriam, over to you. Rethinking our democracy, what should it be like?
Democracy is democracy. I don't know how it would be like, whether you make it black or white. It's democracy, and it's about equity. It's about fair representation. It's about justice. It's about choice, having the capacity to choose your own leaders. So the whole excuse of being democracy is a foreign concept, ABCD. I think that's what is foreign. That's what we are pushing as a narrative to escape the reality of being accountable as leaders, especially if it's put across by our leaders. So most people think that maybe if we organize politics based on our maybe traditional leaders and all that, maybe we can get somewhere, because there would be, like some sort of accountability. And to some extent, I think that the problem, or a slight hitch, is in how African countries were organized by the Berlin Conference. So that's where the democracy looks like it's fragmented, it looks like imported, but democracy as a concept is fine. So the challenge is with our entities, our nations. We feel we are pushed into a box where we don't belong, and that's why it may seem like we have gaps. but it's too late to go back. We can no longer restructure Africa. I think the best way forward is to unite Africa and try to remove all those unnecessary walls that the Berlin put on us. And when we unite as a people, then we can formulate how to govern ourselves in a way that suits us, maybe geographically, maybe as far as our cultures are concerned, because we have diverse cultures and diverse entities of the people. Most people think they're different from others. But as we are developing, I think even those lines are getting grayer and blurred. Economically, for instance, if you are coming from pastoralist background like Ochen, and then I'm coming from agricultural cultivators. But now we are into a different economy. We are into a monetary economy, a formal economy, and we no longer even care about the cows and the potatoes we used to grow back home. So what looks like a difference, what looks like important is soon becoming irrelevant. And I think what we should push is what Ochen talked about, education that really fits us. And that is not only about the Africans in the continent, but also the diaspora Africans. In America, it's different because of having the history of African Americans, the enslaved African descendants. They are incorporating the African history into the curriculum, and it's the right foot forward. In other countries, I think it's gonna follow as they push, as you're saying, if they are lobbying in Canada and other areas. But it's also upon us as diasporians. If you want your children, if you want your next generation to understand Africa, put in the connections. Try to take kids back home. Try to teach them about their culture. Don't kill our languages. And when it comes to killing languages, it also applies to the elite, the so-called middle class in Africa, even within Africa. If your children don't know your language, what Africa of the future are you building? Are you building robots? Are you building cyborgs who are going to just operate anywhere and don't have roots? So when it comes to education, it's both formal and informal. Are you trying to tell your kids our roots, your traditions, what Africa means to you, our ways of living? Or you are leaving them to feed on the internet and pick whatever they pick from anywhere? Are we trying to put that in schools? I'm so glad in Uganda they try to teach vernacular local languages to primary schools, and even most of our languages have been upgraded and put into curriculum, so the children can study. It's through the language. The language is like a channel into the culture. The language teaches you about your proverbs, about your taboos, about your culture and the behaviors. And if we keep our languages alive and we keep that connection alive, we will be able to go back and even improve on the knowledge of our ancestors. There is a rich knowledge in the background that we dropped due to colonial interference about our traditions. We should remember the African is the old being, the old human being, and African civilization is the oldest in the world. And over years, over a million of years, over several generations, they have built on some civilization, improved knowledge in medicine, knowledge in psychology, knowledge in every other aspect that we dropped when we adopted the colonial education, and which taught us that everything African was backward. So if we can incorporate all that and have our historians put their mind together, it's through understanding our past that we will be able to discern our present and even project our future that our next generations can use to develop the African continent.
Okay, so we have had adaptive democracy in Africa. We have forms of decentralization. We have forms of devolution. In Uganda, we have kingdoms, traditional institutions existing alongside modern democratic institutions. But there are still calls for Africanizing democracy. What's your take on this? That democracy is failing because it's imported?
Thank you, Dr. Birete and other panelists. First of all, we have to first ask ourselves, what is African democracy? What does it look like? Because to me, I see that the democracy we have would not have a problem if indeed we say we want to Africanize it. So if we say that during the past we had, let's say, traditional leaders who would only leave power when they die, but what kind of development did they achieve? That is question number one. Then currently, okay, we have leaders, and then if we say that we want to make them into monarchs, what problem would we be causing? Because currently we would even be causing a much more problem compared to even what we are facing if we say we Africanize it. For me, the problem that I see is individualism, greed. Because if we are to agree that, okay, if we are saying, for example, term limit, age limit, and we are saying treat another person as you would wish to be treated, if there is an opposition leader, he doesn't believe in the way how you are doing things, he has an option. That is the best way. For your own information and the rest of us, we are aware that even the African democracy, there used to be succession wars where members of the royal family would fight and even kill each other. So when we talk of African democracy as being the best, I don't buy into that narrative. But I would say that it is our mindset, it is the greed of our people that they make democracy very, very difficult for all of us. So I still believe that, yes, if we were to elect, because people are desperate, they would say that we go to the pre-colonial times. Do you know why they would support that? Because of being desperate. Because of thinking that there is no leadership. People have abandoned them. People are thinking about themselves, not thinking about the good of society. So I still insist that as how culture grows, that you can borrow a leaf of something that is good and you improve your culture. For example, in the African tradition in the past, there are communities that would throw away twins. Now these days we don't. Like, that is improvement in culture. Similarly, there should be improvement. If there is an aspect that we think was in our traditional kind of ruling system, let's bring it back. Like the Ubuntu, that a person would be a leader or a person would be a landlord, is entrusted with this land on behalf of the community. But now if you entrust somebody, like as how we have entrusted the leaders in Uganda, Museveni and his team. But guess what? What belongs to all of us, they take it for themselves. So those are things that we should be fighting.
So I think we are coming to the end of this show. I hope Francis will get back. But in your parting shots, you're going to share recommendations for the triple sanctioned speaker, triple sanctioned triple A, and the way forward for Africa. Starting with you, Dr. Okot.
Thank you very much. Indeed, it was very good getting different perspectives. I want to say that about the triple sanctions, I think is a welcome notion, and Ugandans should not take it in bad faith. And I would, suggest that those who have fallen victims should actually try to do some self-reflection, analysis, and see ways forward if they can be rehabilitated, and that can be done. But I also urge the Western powers to maybe extend and expand the net so that our leaders who are in a responsible position become more responsible. This brings in checks and balances, so that public funds and resources are not abused. And then on the way forward for the African, continent and for liberation, and democracy, I would say that we are there, but not badly off. We have made some progressions and also some kind of setbacks. But I think we can also pick a few lessons from where we have failed. I would like to say that the Western mode of democracy is good. And maybe I would say that let us maybe not just simply cut and paste, okay, model. Maybe let's try to, make it more hybrid, in the sense that I know that, when making hybrid, there is no taking power, just one person. Let's try and be more inclusive, have more power sharing, As you're aware, like Uganda, they say national cake, Let's see how to, maybe distribute, the natural resources and leadership positions so that every citizen feels, being valued, honored, and included. And that will bring peace, fairness, and tranquility in our societies. Otherwise, let's not lose hope. Let us keep our eyes on the prize. There's hope. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chen. Miriam, your parting shot and the way forward.
I also add on what Ochen has said. I think we should improve on the democratic systems we have, the imported systems we have, political systems. Anyway, in any case, even our government structures are imported, so everything is imported. But we can incorporate the good we had in our culture to the imported and what works for us. Wow. And it can be trial and error as we move on. Yeah, like you talked, adoptive democracy. For instance, we can have traditional leaders who share power with the elected leaders. We can have other institutions which can improve on checks and balances, because the biggest problem of Africa and all post-colonial governments, the biggest problem we have is the interference of the colonialists, so what they call neo-colonialism, first of all, and then we also have the militarism. It's like the use of force to control the people. So we have autocratic leaders. They are elected, yes, but they have like a lot of powers which lead them to become despots. So we can look into that and structures and Okot mentioned, that we're not taking it, or I think that's also that's a wrong concept, a political concept which we can tone down a little bit and have shared power, which can improve accountability and maybe control the excessiveness. We can also have incorporate the Ubuntu that Francis mentioned earlier. So we have a lot to really incorporate so that we can have a tailored system which fits into our society's our society's fabric. You know, we have different, a lot of diversities due to our amalgamated smaller nations which were put together. So we need to put all those things into consideration. But going forward, I think democracy as it is in general as a concept is still the best we can have. And we should only look at how to improve it and adopt it fit into our situation for better leadership. And as a conclusion on the sanctions, I hope we get to see more sanctions. And as we are talking about African Liberation Month, why can you imagine if we see having African countries also joining the Western countries into sanctioning our leaders? Or all these South Africa may be joining in. We have the big economies which have big voices and can make a big impact. And talking about South Africa, I want to also appreciate South Africa in the role it took the lead in condemning the genocide in Palestine. That was something which really made me proud as an African, and we really appreciate South Africans' leading example. I hope other African leaders can borrow a leaf and see how to really liberate or oppressed peoples across the world. And we should be the ones to spearhead all the liberation causes, because we've been oppressed and we know how bad it is. So we should lead that, take on the South African example and really take it to another level where we see all we lead into the liberation of other African countries, and also other Africans and other oppressed minority people across the world.
Thank you very much. I think we've lost Francis again. This brings us to the end of today's Diaspora Show, and it's been an honor to moderate this terrific panel with the Francis Kamhanda, Dr. Okoto Chen, and Ms. Miriam Chomgasho. And that's all from us to you, viewers, this Sunday for Diaspora Show.
Thank you, and have a nice weekend, all of you.
Bye-bye.